In public speaking, very often, what you say is just as important as how you say it. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we sat in a room and listened to a speaker talk for several minutes, and yet, when their speech ends, you cannot remember a single point that they made. Now, this likely wasn't because they lacked knowledge, lacked intelligence, or any other element. More often than not, this deficiency was due to their speech or communication not having a clear and strong structure. One of the biggest misconceptions I find about public speaking is that success comes from purely having great delivery, having pitch, tone, eye contact, variety. Those are important, yes, and very often, it is those elements of public speaking which give ideas strength and weight. But they're only one part of the equation, because true success and understanding comes with having a strong and impactful structure. The way I like to think of it is like a house. You can't have a house without a strong and solid structure. You could have the most beautiful house in the area, the most modern, and yet, if its structure is rotting and crumbling before itself, that house will not stand for very long. Similarly, a speaker can be as charismatic, as likable as he wants, and yet his ideas will still have to carry some sort of structure or weight so that the audience can understand him. Structure is what turns scattered thoughts into a single, unified message. Let's begin with a simple question. Why is it that people stop listening? Many speakers' audiences lose attention because very often they're simply bored. After all, listening to somebody talk for several minutes can be very cumbersome, and oftentimes people don't have very large attention spans. They tune out, not because they dislike the speaker or what the speaker is saying, but likely because their minds are not able to grasp onto and relate to the ideas. Imagine somebody giving you directions through the city. They tell you to turn left at the second light, stop at a restaurant, go right on the 5th exit on the highway. The information isn't necessarily bad. It's just the fact that steps include confusing and far-flung instructions your mind automatically tunes out. Similarly, during speeches, if we give the right information but lack that clear structure that the audience can grasp onto and follow through with, you risk them tuning out, not because your speech is bad or because you convey the wrong information, but very likely because of the structure in which you delivered it in. One of the most simplest structures we can follow to avoid any confusion is, to put it simple, point, explanation, and example. Almost any idea can be communicated through these 3 steps. First, you state your core thesis or idea of the section. For instance, let's make a mock speech about communication. My core thesis of this example speech would be that communication is one of the most valuable skills in today's world. It's that simple. I have my first point. Now, your point could be as complex or as simple as it needs to be, as long as it fits in with what you're trying to say. Next, the explanation. Your job in the explanation is to explain why is it your point matters, or in other words, elaborate on the ideas you expressed in the previous section. For instance, if my point is public speaking and communication are one of the most valuable skills to have today, my explanation would be something such as, many studies show that those who have public speaking and effective communication repeatedly outrank others who lack those skills and yet still profess something else. See how that explanation doesn't repeat the point, but elaborates on it, creating a natural flow in your speech through point explanation can help keep your audience engaged. They have a clear structure their minds can latch onto, and as a result, they will be more likely to listen and be engaged with your oration. Finally, we have an example. Now, an example is elaborating or providing a realistic scenario to help explain your explanation and your point. Very often, when we're speaking, the audience sometimes fails to grasp whatever it is you're saying. It's natural. They could be the most intelligent people in the room, and yet, when the mind listens to an oration, it naturally becomes slightly zoned out. You need to have an example so that the audience's minds can listen, understand, and observe exactly what you're trying to say. An effective example in my speech regarding communication and public speaking could be that, for instance, if person A, whose name is Thomas, were to have good public speaking and communication and has an identical background to person B, who we'll call Frank. Frank has exactly the same qualifications, exactly the same background, and yet Thomas has the ability to publicly speak. Studies repeatedly show people like Thomas outrank those such as Frank simply because of their ability to elaborate and express ideas. By providing a clear scenario that allows you, the listener, to better understand and visualize what I'm trying to say can help you better improve your communication as a whole. Now, obviously, this structure isn't set in stone or completely inflexible. The whole point of communicating your message is to find the structure that works for you. The structure will often work in all scenarios, but the question you have to ask yourself is, how can I maximize my impact? When I start writing my speeches or orations, one of the first questions that I have in mind after I receive the topic is, what do I want my listeners the very next day when they wake up to first remember? Which part of my speech do I want to make the most impact in the lives and minds of my audience? The core idea in this scenario is that by writing your speech with a clear audience and focal point in mind can help you better structure it in a way that works best for you. Very often, you'll see speakers who just jumble ideas together without any clear structure. They have the ideas, yes, but they lack the ability to clearly communicate them, and in other words, make an impact. Every story, statistic, quote, or illustration should only strengthen your key message. Every section of your speech must have a purpose. Think of a movie, for example. Movies follow a clear and understandable structure. But if the director were to put a random scene that has nothing to do with the story, well, you're likely not going to appreciate it or simply ignore it in the broader scheme of things. In fact, going off track in your speech or communication can risk the audience losing their grasp on the ideas you are trying to communicate with. And that's why one of the most important elements when structuring a speech is the idea of transitions. Think of transitions like bridges. Very often, people wrongfully include irrelevant information as a substitute for a transition. Transitions between your main points when expressing your ideas should carry a deep meaning. It doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be complex. As long as it clearly blends those two ideas together, that transition can help better your speech as a whole. My final piece of advice is that think of it not as a speech, but as a story. You're not there to deliver a formal oration in front of hundreds of people. You're not there to go to that interview in a suit and tie and formally deliver explanations. Your goal is to tell your story. The story of yourself. The story of your ideas. The story of whatever you're trying to discuss. Because at the end, stories that have structure are often exponentially more engaging than speeches that lack it. So for your next speech, adopt this. It doesn't necessarily have to be point, explanation, example. It doesn't necessarily have to follow a rigid formula. Let your mind and topic be your guide. Focus not on the logistics, not on the analytical aspect, but on the creativity. How you can express your ideas in an engaging story that can impact the audience. How you can deliver that one sentence that stays in the audience's mind weeks after the oration was given. Because at the end, when your ideas don't have structure, the audience can't follow them. But when you do, they become engaged. And when people can easily follow your ideas, they can easily remember it, even days after you finish your speech. Once again, if you enjoyed this video and do in fact feel that having structure within a speech does in fact improve and better the quality as a whole, please feel free to like, subscribe, share, and comment at your convenience. Otherwise, have a great day.